Harrow. Shasti's been taken, Remer announced when she returned from her latest mission. Her downtrodden expression flipped to surprise. Tuner, you made it! It's good to see you again! Tuner, the bard, stood from his place in a circle between Sickle and Brett to hug her. The number 41 was stamped onto his armor's chestplate under ash and tangerine-colored ribbons.
Shame to hear about Shasti. My first sergeant was from there. He'll be furious. How's Yukala?
Last I heard from my other raids, still standing strong. How many soldiers is the company up to now? Remer glanced around as she sat against Harrow. He propped her up as she leaned her weight against his. She was always exhausted after returning from a trek through the desert, and they had gotten into the habit of sitting that way while she recapped her findings to them.
It's doing well. We're up to about 150 now, with still more in Tanzanite's academy. We haven't had meat since the last time we left Rakasif, but there's been plenty of food otherwise. Harrow and the other cooks are doing the best they can with it, Brett said.
Harrow appreciated the compliment. Please tell me someone in the new platoon is a medic. Remer shifted. She fit perfectly against Harrow's side. He had missed her presence and relished her return. Nope! Sickle exclaimed with sarcastic enthusiasm. Remer dropped her head against Harrow's shoulder. Ugh, what did we get? Several builders, another culinary specialist, a few more management and administration scums, a few surveillance and reconnaissance raids, a couple loggers, a lot of good that'll do us out here. Sickle rattled the various rates off, using his fingers to count. The builders are female, so Remer, you can have some lady friends. Are you lot not good enough? I have to outsource my friendships now? She joked.
We also got a master of arms, Brett added.
Good, so we'll have sharp weapons, but nothing to use them against. Remer nuzzled her cheek against Harrow. He wanted to nuzzle her back, but her head was too far down his arm. It's more important for her to be comfortable. Harrow gestured to a nearby group. There are more gold in the camp now, too. Brett counted another 2 of Sickle's fingers.
Ah, yes, we can't forget the noble fighters.
You're basically dead weight until we see combat, Sickle whispered so the officer knights wouldn't overhear. If we see combat. Remer also added in a whisper. Louder, she said. I should report to D12 now that I've caught my breath. I'll be back. She got up and headed for the Major General's tent. Tuner watched her go.
What's the deal with you and Remer, Harrow?
What? His voice caught in his throat.
You've always seemed close, but I was wondering if you've defined your relationship.
We're not in a relationship. Brett and I had a bet running on how long until they are. I lost. I said after the first time one of them was in life-threatening danger. It cost me 5 lead coins, Sickle said. Harrow hadn't believed they would bet on that. Everything had always been platonic in their friend group. When did you do that?
Brett grinned sloppily. One of the dozens of times the 2 of you snuck away by yourselves to definitely not practice throwing your sabers around. What was your bet, Brett? Tuner asked. That they'd never figure themselves out alone. There'd need to be a push from one of us first. Tuner rested his temple on his outstretched fingers. You've gone and inserted such a push, so that's not anything to bet against. Brett dug around his gem pouch. We can make a new bet then, given what everyone already knows. Sickle, you can get back in on this too if you aren't too salty about losing your coin. Sickle sneered, but reached into his pouch as well. Harrow shook his head in amazement that they were so bold to do this in front of him. If they feel this comfortable, it must mean they see me more like a brother than a friend. I'll take it as a compliment. So what are each of you betting this time then? Harrow, it's not fair for you to know. You might rig it toward your favorite's favor. We should finish the details of our transactions privately. Tuner rose to leave. If that's the case, we should stay. I'm confident Harrow likes me best, and I have no issue with him knowing how I'm resting my coin. Brett crossed his arms and planted his feet. You twat. I'm everyone's favorite, but we shouldn't put him in that position. Sickle also stood. 2 out of 3 votes say we leave. Sorry, lad. Tuner patted Harrow's shoulder as they left him. Across the campsite, Harrow noticed a few of the builders Sickle had mentioned. He hadn't met them since they arrived, so he wondered why they had huddled together to watch him. One of them waved when he met her eyes. Confused, Harrow waved back. He glanced away and found Remer leaving the Major General's tent. It got his attention this time.
Remer sat across from him and dunked her head into her hands. What? Remer's hands slid down her face and fell into her lap. Shasti's disappearance! A town that size vanishing overnight, just like all the others. I think it spooked him. It means his lord cousin's been taken as a blood prisoner. Harrow's mirth from the shenanigans of his friend's bet de-escalated into a somber feeling. It's terrible. We could have helped them. If only he had listened to your warning. I'm hoping he'll heed this next one. On my route, I also went to Crusade, and there were also indications of tracks there. Her home's in danger. Harrow bounced a nervous knee. Do you think he'll move the company to defend the town? I hope so. I don't know for certain if they were Rysik tracks or not. The prints didn't quite look the same, but they looked similar. It could have been a different Rysiglai, maybe a smaller one, or another creature entirely. They might have been old, and the sand might have shifted to make them look different. I'm much less confident about this set, but after Shasti, I wasn't about to take the chance, especially not when my family's at risk. That's perfectly reasonable, Remer. Did you explain all of that to him? Yes, everything. But Harrow, seeing Shasti after they took it, when it had just been there, for it to just be gone? It was surreal. It was too much. I can't imagine what it would have been like if it had been Cravad. It must have been horrifying for you when we came back to Fogori. It was. It still is. I think about my mom and siblings constantly. She reached out to him, setting her hand on his knee to halt its shaking. I don't know what to do. I joined the army to save them, but we're not doing anything, save waiting for the rest of the crusade to join us. I would have been better off going after them on my own. We have to do more. Even if it's against the rules, we can't keep waiting around for D12 to fortify his spine. Too many have been taken already, and we can't allow them to become so powerful that they can take us too. Although Harrow agreed with Remer, he wasn't sure how to proceed. He was also nervous about receiving additional lashes, but depending on what they could accomplish with just the two of them, he wagered he'd be willing to take the punishment. If it meant a chance to save his family, he'd gladly risk his life. Do you have an idea? I do. D12 emerged from his tent and blew the muster horn. She rolled her eyes. I'll tell you after muster. Everyone from their platoon gathered in the same place they always did. Good morning. Checking in for muster. Harrow repeated to N15 for seemingly the millionth time since they had left Hisafe. N15 checked his name off her list as she went down the row. When she finished, she handed the list to D12, as did all the other platoon leaders. D12 didn't bother to look at the muster sheets. We've received word from High King Panite. Oh, shit! Someone yelled from one of the new platoons. D12 eyed the person who said it. Harrow wondered if a whipping was in their future, and he pitied them if it was. I'm itching to know what the High King could want to say to us. Does he send tidings to boost our spirits? Gratitude for volunteering to defend the realm? He has presented our company with a quest. To discover the location of the Rysik nest and rescue the enslaved humans. However, we also have received a warning of a pending attack on Cravad, so we will split our effort. All the surveillance and reconnaissance raids, you will travel to the Rysik lands to search for the nest. The rest of us will march to Cravad. Harrow exchanged smiles with Remer and the rest of his platoon. Finally, I'll get to defend citizens, and Remer will help look for my family. I wish I could go with her, but it's better than what we were doing, and dividing the work will yield the greatest payoff. Thank you, Asiel. This is what we were hoping for. We just had to be patient. D12 waited for the excited murmurs to settle. All of us, except T97. Harrow jerked his attention back to his Major General. Why not me? T97 will return to Hisafe and report to Loking Tanzanite for further instruction. The entire trek back to Hisafe, Harrow could not rest. He worried about Remer and the vampiric lands. He worried about his family and the Rysiglai's clutches. He worried about Vahantri attacking him, and he worried why he had been called back to Hisafe. Once he reached the markets, he became confused. Every stall in the bazaar outside the capital posted posters of himself. Although they captured his likeness well, he thought the artist had made his nose a little too wide and his ears stick out too far. Are these wanted posters? What have I done? Then again, shouldn't they have bounty information if they are?
It's Harrow!
A hefty man nudged his scrawny companion's shoulder and pointed to the young soldier. The second man eyed Harrow up and down and checked one of the nearby posters as though comparing the resemblance. I think you're right, he said. Harrow awkwardly tried to move on, but the men had drawn the attention of additional onlookers towards him. One woman started chanting his name, promoting others to join her. The growing crowd prevented him from passing through to the mosaic castle. Harrow wanted to shy away from the commotion, but there was nowhere to go. The group bombarded him with questions. They came so quickly he didn't know which to answer or who had asked. Though he felt rude, he didn't answer any of them. I didn't expect the hardest part of the journey would be once I arrived at the capital. 2 lines of officer knights marched through the streets toward him. Basil, what's happening? Has D12 complained of my behavior to King Tanzanite?
Harrow, we've been expecting you. If you'll follow us, we'll escort you to King Tanzanite.
Yes, sir. Harrow would not deny a superior's request. What is going on? The question ate at him, but he waited to ask. The administration official who had helped Harrow fill out his enlistment paperwork jumped when she spotted the procession escorting him. I'll go tell the Low King that you're here now. I wish I had a chance to freshen up first. I'll be as dirty as I was the first time I met with King Tanzanite. Harrow checked his nose barrels to ensure they were clear without alerting his escorts to what he was doing. The female vizier returned. He's ready for you. She's smiling, so I doubt I'm about to lose my head for disobedience. Come, it's good to see you, my boy. King Tanzanite's spirits had much improved since their last meeting. I suppose he's no longer grieving for his slain cousin. This welcome is a good sign. No need to look so frightened. Tell me, didn't D12 explain what's to happen to you? Harrow gulped. Punishment? Certainly not. I can't believe he didn't tell you that you're to be sainted. Sainted? Why wouldn't he tell me that? Was it because he was speaking in front of everyone and didn't think I'd want the others to know? You must have been worried all this way. Now, it's too late today, but we'll set you up in a room here for the evening, and we'll have the ceremony at first sunhigh tomorrow, assuming the high priest can be transported here by then. If you please, your majesty, what am I to be sainted for? My major general is a man of few words, isn't he? You are being honored by the decree of High King Panite for your efforts to support the crusade. By spreading your story, the northern kingdoms have been able to account for all the spawn in Sovane, Verdun, and Wojet, and in many of the realm's other kingdoms as well. Most of them came to us after hearing your tale for the sake of their safety. The only one unaccounted for is your mother, I'm sorry to say. But because of your efforts, she is the only one. And if I'm not mistaken, there's an ongoing effort to save her as we speak. In addition to the spawn you've helped protect, our enlistment rates are historically high. We have more soldiers undergoing training now than Sovane has had in its regional army when you first arrived. As a show of gratitude, I will present you with a meritorious ribbon after your sainting. This is worse than being punished. Is something the matter? You still seem troubled, even after I've delivered the best of news. I am honored by both you and High King Panite, Harrow said. But I came to Hisove thinking I was summoned to repent for a transgression, not to receive accolades. Initially, I traveled the desert and shared my story to warn others and keep them safe, to protect the spawn, the citizens, and the faith. I enlisted for the same reason. So it won't surprise you to hear that my heart yearns to return to them. As you mentioned, the initial rescue efforts started right as I was summoned. At the same time, the rest of the company set out to track down one of the first promising traces we've had of Raisaglai in all this time. I don't know how many weeks I've camped in the ruins of my home, but I am torn not to be with my fellow soldiers now. I fear returning to an empty campsite that remains empty forever. I may lose the chance to fight alongside my platoon to defend the kingdom and the realm. I could fail to rescue my brother and sisters and my mother because I am not there to help. When I had thought I was to be punished, I could forgive myself for leaving, but learning it's an honor I'm to receive, the question I keep asking myself is, why couldn't I have waited to receive it until after the war, after I had truly earned such decorations? King Tanzanite nodded. In all the ages, I doubt there has been anyone as deserving of sainthood. However, I understand your plight. Had the High King known your concerns, I am certain he would have appreciated their merit and postponed your ceremony. Granted, I believe he also recognizes what a crucial time this is for the realm. The Southern Crusade party is finally making progress toward us, and the other kingdoms are preparing their regional armies to join the larger host. Now more than ever is the time to encourage the soldiers headed for the front lines, to motivate them and inspire morale. Already, you've done a magnificent job, even without raising your sword. It seems like I fail whenever I do raise it. The Low King continued. By giving the realm something to celebrate, You are again aiding in the overall efforts of the crusade. Your sainting tomorrow may do more for the crusade than if you had postponed the ceremonies." His High King's words had lessened his burdens of guilt, but had not erased it. "After the ceremony, if you know where to regroup with the company, I will have your transportation arranged. If not, we will send you to Fagori to speed your traveling time. Now that all the spawn have been safely transferred, my low transportation mage can spare the sorcery. At the least, we can hasten your return." Unfortunately, Harrow wouldn't know where to intercept the main company. It would be a risk to be sent to Cravad directly if the Rhysogli had overtaken it. So Harrow picked the next best place. "Thank you for the generous offer. Fagori would be for the best. The surveillance and reconnaissance rates will start returning there soon, and I'd like to know as soon as possible if they were successful in finding the nest." "It's settled. We'll feast, arrange your accommodations, and prepare the stage for tomorrow." Harrow hadn't been so comfortably full since he'd left home. Exquisite delicacies such as hummingbird served in creamy cheese sauce, braised lotus fish, sterling song wine, a sourspurt pastry drizzled with a honeysuckle glaze, and a host of other exotic foods decorated his plate. It was Harrow's first time eating seafood. He could never have afforded it as a farmer. He appreciated the chance to eat more than his fair share of rations, but he wished Remer, his family, and his other friends could have joined him. Instead, High Priest Conviction dined with Harrow and the Low King and Queen Consort for their meal before the ceremony. "On behalf of Angelism, myself, the High King, and the Archspawn, we are grateful to you, Harrow. You have displayed an immaculate showing of faith and moved the realm in ways you cannot fathom," Conviction said. His mannerisms were delicate, but he exuded a familiar, tougher presence. Harrow had never met the High Priest before, but he could not ignore the inkling. To avoid offending any of the high-ranking officials, Harrow kept his comments minimal and kept his eyes trained on his plate or the striking red, yellow, green, and blue glass mosaic lanterns that substituted for a chandelier. "Everyone has been too kind. You, the High King, King Tanzanite, it's too great an honor." "Nonsense. Conviction. Do you hear this? I think the boy's been beaten down too far. We all should appreciate what a blessing it is to have Harrow in our midst." Conviction severed a hummingbird wing from its body in a precise cut. Value exists in internalizing subservience. Tanzanite's mirth faded. "I suppose you and D12 have a similar outlook then." At D12's mention, Harrow realized that was who Conviction reminded him of. Harrow said nothing, but behaved as if his Major General dined beside him instead of the High Priest. As Harrow brought a mouthful of lotus fish up, Conviction asked, "Harrow, I'm curious about your mother." Harrow raised his eyebrows, but did not make eye contact with the priest. Harrow was already gaping in anticipation of the bite, but his face froze until he could recompose himself and set down the fish. Previously, the Low King and Queen had questioned him about the status of the army. His friends had occasionally discussed their homes, but they never pried into each other's family lives, so Harrow hadn't expected the personal question. "She's a spawn, yes," Conviction pressed. Harrow licked his lips nervously. "Yes, her name is Ageline." "Pretty," Low Queen Melite said. Conviction ticked his head. Harrow dared to check his expression after a silent moment. The High Priest stared at Harrow with expressionless eyes. "What else does he want me to say?" "Before all this, we worked our family's fields, but Fagori's chief often consulted my mother on larger decisions for the town. My mother took care of my 3 siblings and me since my father passed a few rotations ago, but that's it. We had a quiet life." "What did your father die from?" The question blindsided Harrow. Although the deepest wounds had healed, he still missed his father. Speaking of him still hurt. Harrow brought the next bite of lotus fish down more gracefully, despite the resurrection of his heart-rending memories. "Infection. He cut himself with a scythe while working." Conviction's eyes narrowed. Fagori didn't have a healer. Harrow flushed, embarrassed to defend his beloved, though pitiful, town. "We had an herbalist, but the herbs didn't take fast enough. He needed a mage." "As a spawn, your mother should have had access to the highest level of care. It's outrageous that she should suffer preventable grief." Conviction's tone turned accusatory, and he shifted his focus to the Low King and Queen. King Tanzanite looked as abashed as Harrow felt. "We have to spread the mage classes around. We had a weather mage in Fagori. and we had healing mages in other towns Spawn lived in. Conviction set down his dinnerware. But now all the Sylvani Spawn are living here in Hisafe, correct? The Low King hesitated in his reply. Yes. Conviction ticked his head again. So those mages are now free to support the crusade efforts. Rubbing his neck, King Tanzanite said, I might be able to spare one, but those regions are dependent on their healers, especially those living under a barrier of health. Harrow, could the crusade use a healing mage? Conviction folded his hands neatly atop his pure white thobe. Of all the places Harrow thought he'd find himself, he never expected to be caught in a political sparring match between the High Priest and his Low King. Harrow feared insulting one of them regardless of his answer. His gaze trickled along the table as he considered what to say and where to look. He risked offending his Low Queen when he glanced to her for aid. She glided into the conversation effortlessly and undercut their tension with a bright tone. As Harrow mentioned before, he's only been with the crusade for a few weeks now. He'd need rotations of military experience and additional schooling in the academy to make that sort of decision, unless you intend to promote him to Major General to supplant D12. I understand he's a private, but he has been there where we have not. I want his opinion. Queen Melite pressed her painted lips together to concede the point. Harrow treaded even more lightly than he had when he tried to explain that his sainting ceremony was a waste of time. Everyone anticipates the arrival of the 2 healing mages from the Southern Crusade party. When they do arrive, many will be relieved. A few weeks ago, I had a friend who nearly succumbed to infection because we did not have anyone to treat her. Although I'm confident a healing mage would have prevented the infection, a trained medic could have fought it. I'm hoping one of the current recruits might be training to be a medic right now. If so, it would alleviate many concerns among the company in the intermediary. The Low Queen smiled at him with approval. Another thought occurred to Harrow. If the company is successful at tracking down the potential lead in crusade, a medic might be more important to be waiting for their return than I would be. I would request that if one is available, your transportation mage send them to Fogori, and I will walk. The self-sacrifice weave through your bones? Conviction asked. When an opportunity to request aid presents itself, I am going to take it. If I cannot fight alongside my friends, I will seek ways to help them however I can. If my sword will not serve, I will wield my voice. King Tanzanite measured Harrow. Conviction, what do you think about Harrow giving an address after the ceremony? Conviction said, We're scheduled to have a service afterwards. Please don't push the topic. Harrow sensed a heightening of animosity from the High Priest. The Low King continued. Before it starts, Harrow, I know it's sudden, but your words will mean so much to the people. You've moved me with every conversation we've had. I disagree. There isn't enough time to write a speech or approve it. Conviction took a sip of expensive wine and gave a disapproving side glance to the king. What needs approval? He speaks from the heart. Let him. My answer is no. Fine. King Tanzanite scooted his chair. We should all get changed and prepared. First Sun High will be upon us before we know it. King Tanzanite stood and strode toward his chambers. At the egress, his caftan caught a crossbrace and ballooned out behind himself. The queen followed him out of the dining hall along with the regional guards. Wind caught in her Hogenson suit, and the orange fabrics flared out behind her as well. Conviction scraped his chair's back legs against the sandstone floor. Your Holiness, do you have any family in military service? Harrow dared to ask while they were alone. Conviction appeared as taken aback by the personal question as Harrow had felt. No, why? You remind me of my Major General. I wasn't sure if perhaps you were related. And what of me reminds you of him? Conviction narrowed beady eyes. I'm not sure. You don't look physically similar, and you both talk differently, but something about your presence is the same. Why do you think such a question is appropriate for you to ask your High Priest? You asked about my family. I didn't want to offend you if you expected a similar question in return. Mechanically, Conviction rose and departed the dining room. As Harrow believed the High Priest would ignore his comment, Conviction stilled in the egress. I didn't. Harrow forgot about the High Priest as the castle's viziers guided him through the ceremonial preparations. Servants scrubbed, dressed, and groomed Harrow. His new fabrics were thicker and stiffer than any he had worn in his life. He didn't particularly care for the finer, warmer clothing, as it only served to restrict his motions, but because the Low King Tanzanite wanted him to wear it, He wouldn't argue. At least I only have to wear this stuffy woolen broadcloth for a short while. The low king has to suffocate in these fabrics like this all the time. As his king had said, the sun sprinted across the skies, and soon it was first sun high. Harrow, wearing the back pieces of an undented bronze armor set strapped over the heavy fabrics, emerged onto the upper balcony of the mosaic castle before the city of Hisafe. People waved tangerine banners and pictures of his face, but from the distance, Harrow could barely see what the images were. A roar of cheers grumbled from below, but he couldn't distinguish any of the individual voices or shouted phrases. Harrow approached the high priest and knelt before him. Conviction withdrew Harrow's saber from its scabbard and rested the flat side of the blade atop Harrow's head. Alas, the third worthless act this sword's been used for has finally come. I hereby decree that you, Harrow, have now risen to the position of sainthood by the authority of my position as the High Priest of Coserai. Rise, Harrow of Vagori, Saint of the 13th Age.